Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Magic gameplay. This time around we are on the Southern Chaos Wastes, playing as the Greenskins against the Dawi. So a ye old classic grudge match. And once again, I'm bringing Grimgor. I've been having so much fun with the Greenskins. I'm sure you guys are at this point sick of it, but there's just such a fun faction. I'm so hyped for the WoW rework, and so I've basically just been playing Greenskins a whole bunches. And either way, so for my lord, I did bring Grimgor here, the meanest, the greenest. I actually think he has a bit of a niche. He has a bit of a niche against the Dwarves. You can obviously bring Wartsag and Azag, and they're both still rather competitive. But one of the cool things about Grimgor is that obviously the Dwarf lords can't run away from him, and he can absolutely clobber them with his monstrous melee attack and Gitsnik. And he can also tear through Dwarven infantry. He provides Wa, and he's rather cheap, which I think is definitely very, very nifty. Whereas if you want to bring Wa otherwise, you're forced to bring either Azag, who's not that good of a combat lord, and his spells can be a little iffy if your opponent builds to counteract spells. Wartsag obviously doesn't have a bound Wa, so this way you can actually double up. You can get a Wa off on Grimgor, and then here we go from the Orc Shaman later on. So that's really why I like bringing Grimgor. So I did bring Grimgor with all his kit, Foe Seeker, Stand Your Ground, Wa, and Gitsnik, an Orc Shaman alongside him with basically nothing too fancy. He does have evasion, which honestly I could have taken off. Power of the Wall for extra power recharge when I cast Here We Go. Of course, Here We Go is an absolutely monster spell. You don't really want Fists of Gork because it gives you magic damage, and especially if a dwarf specs into magic resistance, that can be a major problem. Frontline here for Black Orcs, of course, to tear through Dwarven infantry. The only unit they don't do too well against is Hammers, which my opponent actually brought quite a few of. They're backed by a Night Gabo Shaman with Itchy Nuisance, Sneaky Stabbing, as well as the Wand of Jet, so some decent sort of selection of supporting spells for the main blob here. In the front line, we do have the AP Gloonies, the Regiment of Renown, Unbreakable Night Goblin Fanatics. The poison they apply will definitely be helping against units like the Hammers here. Out on the periphery, two nasty Skulkers on either end, one of which is already getting shot up by my opponent's Gyrocopters. A major problem with this build, and in hindsight, 2020, was that I didn't really bring much range. I did bring the Mogrebs and Marauders, but rather than deploying them with my main force, I vanguarded them behind my opponent. And the end result is that these Gyrocopters are having an absolute field day, blasting my nasty Skulkers to Kingdom Come. Then in back here we do have Dirkit Squigs as well as normal Squighoppers. Rather potent units against Dwarves, because they do apply poison, have AP, bonus against infantry, all that good stuff, and are very, very quick. For my opponent's build, besides the Gyrocopters that we saw there, my opponent did decide to bring a Rune Lord on foot. Now, interestingly enough, nothing fancy on him. Just the magic resistant missiles that he's got built in, Master of Wrath and Ruin, and Master of Negation, so very cheap. Personally, though, given his build, my opponent did go for 3 hammers. I think that it would have been good in this sort of situation to put the Rune Lord on a Anvil of Doom to get the Locus of Power, because hammers are very susceptible to Fate of Buna, but if you bring Azag, obviously I didn't bring Azag, so in this situation it doesn't matter, but it's definitely one of those things I think you should consider when you're going for more elite Dwarven builds. For his front line, my opponent does have, well, besides the hammers, have a mix of some miners, dwarf warriors, so definitely some cheapo depot units. Miners probably just chaff the filler. And 2 units of Thunder, so definitely some decent amounts of AP, definitely some decent amounts of sort of chaff to block me up, 3 units of Rangers in the back line, so very cheap but very efficient units, and then 2 units of Slayers in the very back. And and a Thane with Tormentor Sword, of course. So just all in all, a rather well-rounded build. I just think that bring the Thane on the Locus, or the Rune Lord on the Locus Power toting Anvil would have been a good idea, but other than that, I definitely think this is a pretty solid build. And obviously, the lack of Locus of Power here is not going to make any difference because I didn't bring any magic damage. Nonetheless, you can see my nasty Skulkers here are getting routed. You can see how now Steam Guns are usually pretty crap. I've been kind of cynical about Gyrocopters, and that is not likely to change. I don't think they're a very good unit at all. But in this sort of situation where, due to my bad choices and bad unit selection, my opponent is able to get massive value out of it. His Gyrocopters is definitely a bit of an issue. You can see they've already racked up 26 kills, taking about half the HP here off these nasty Skulkers. So I'm definitely taking a big beating. In the meantime, though, I'm closing on my opponent. You can see I'm spreading out the squigs here. My opponent is choosing not to open fire on me, viewing the front here as the main threat. You can see the Black Orcs here taking a withering volley from the Thunders. Before deciding to shoot and scoot. You can see some Ranger fire pouring into the Black Orcs, but really it doesn't matter too much. Obviously it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. You can see I do get a little bit of those spinning loons here into these Dwarf Warriors. They do an okay amount of damage. They're going to spin on a little bit, not really do very much, but it doesn't really matter. You can see we're immediately plowing in. These Dwarf Warriors are not going to last long against this double trouble of AP Loonies and Black Orcs. Over here, Black Orcs are taking on the Hammers, and they actually got their charge off, where the Hammers did not, which is going to give them an early edge that they can then exploit into the long run. And now my Nasty Skulkers are closing in on the flanks, looking for some opportunistic backstabbing shots. These Nasty Skulkers, though, have been completely routed, but you can see now the Squigs going in for the Jugular. Now, Squigs are rather cheap at only 650, so I don't feel too bad about throwing them into, say, these Thunders. Even if my opponent does counteract with Slayers and shut me down, I figure, you know, it doesn't really matter. As long as I can shut these units down, I get on top of these Thunders, start working on these Dwarf Warriors, force those breaks, it's going to be useful. Master of Wrath and Ruin going down on these Black Orcs, evening the odds, or definitely improving the odds for these Hammers, who would have otherwise probably taken a big beating. And my opponent does get Slayers on top of my Nasty Skulkers, which was one of the very good sort of trades that the Slayers can get. So definitely a big problem for me. You can see over here, though, the Nasty Skulkers are making a dash for it, going after those Rangers, exploiting that opportunity to get into my opponent's backline. In the meantime, you can see these Thunders have been completely compromised, as of these Dwarf Warriors, and you can see the AP Loonies and Black Orcs, backed by Here We Go, are just piling through. Grimgor, of course, did pop WoW when he hit those Dwarf Warriors, which allowed them to be collapsed very quickly. Meantime, over here, the Black Orcs, with the help of HE Nuisance, are absolutely piling through these Hammerers, who, of course, just don't have the they just don't really have the ability to hit the Black Orcs that consistently. It makes it so even the Black Orcs are getting hit less than a third of the time, which is really useful. Night Goblin Squighoppers do pile in from the flank. You can see, though, my opponent is still hot in pursuit with these Slayers, but really things are looking okay. You can see over here the Nasty Skulkers trading pretty efficiently, shanking these Hammers. Over here, Miners, though, being used to zone away my Mogreb's Managing Marauders, so some good play from my opponent. And these Gyrocopters, though, sitting here idle, on 80 kills, of course, but just not doing anything right now. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, you can see he's definitely suffering a little bit. These Black Orcs and the AP Loonies, having mopped up this flank, or this center pocket, have turned around to go deal with the Thane and the Hammers over here. My opponent, though, using his Slayers to very good effect to pursue these Nasty Skulkers and Black Orcs off the field, doing some nasty work against them. But at the same time, these Durkid Squigs, as well as the Nasty Skulkers here, are pursuing the Rangers off the field. Now, unfortunately, these guys are winded. I'm not even entirely sure how. They don't have any kills, so I'm not sure. It's probably from just walking. But you can see we're getting some rear charges here on these Rangers. The Durkid Squigs are start tearing through them, and it's going to be very, very, very short game for them. Over here, in the meantime, the Mogreb's Managing Marauders are just piling past the Thunders. I don't really feel like engaging on them. I'm not too concerned about shutting them down. I really want to shut these Gyrocopters down before they tear through my poor Nasty Skulkers. And you can see already that damage from the steam guns is going down, starting to knock off model after model. But my hope is that we can whittle those gyros out. Over here in the meantime, in the pits, Grimgor with the gang is tearing through the Rune Lord, who you can see has his HP just dropping. He's getting torn to shreds. Really not having a very good day of it. Getting absolutely sliced and diced into little itty bitty pieces, and he really just can't get away from all these angry Black Orcs. And definitely some rough stuff as he does promptly shatter. But in the meantime, Grimgor is cleaving his way through these Slayers. He's basically the hero who dumpstered the Rune Lord here, and now he's doing his best to tear through those Slayers. So some good stuff for me. Over here, the Durkid Squigs are tying down the Miners as well as the Thunders, so giving me a very good value. This is obviously a bit of a problem for my opponent, who wasn't able to disentangle his Thunders there. In the meantime, these Hammers have way over pursued, chasing after these Nasty Skulkers and Black Orcs and those sorts of routing units, and now they're all the way out here, which means they're not in a position to help. In my opponent's army, this is a big problem with Dwarves. If you overextend, you're in deep trouble. Over here, I'm using my cheap Night Goblin Shaman to pursue these Thunders, keeping them routing, then turning the Night Goblin Squighoppers onto them, knowing that they can wipe them out. Meantime, an Itchy Nuisance is going to go down over here on my opponent's Slayers as well as Hammers, which will hopefully even the odds for the Black Orcs. Black Orcs will do okay against Hammers, and especially against Slayers, but nonetheless, these AP Loonies are getting absolutely eviscerated, so I was kind of hoping to counteract that a little bit. You can see the Nasty Skulkers and Black Orcs coming back here, definitely having taken a mauling from those Slayers when they retreated earlier. So, regardless, you can see at this point things are definitely looking a little grim for my opponent. You can see the Nasty Skulkers here are getting constantly shot up, but they have managed to eviscerate those Rangers. The Dwarf Warriors are shattered. My opponent is really down to just this handful of Rangers, and is losing units fast. His units are just so separated that Gyros don't have enough really ammo to keep going for very long, and obviously they can't do much to the Black Orcs. If you ever do testing against heavily armored troops, you will find that Gyros with any gun, honestly, even the Brimstone guns, don't do all that well against heavy armor. Nonetheless, over here the Mogreb's Managing Marauders do get routed by my opponent's Rangers due to some bad micro and bad play on my part, allowing them to just get shot up there. But you can see over here my opponent is getting a nice little surround on my Black Orcs. I start pulling away, but then decide that perhaps it's actually a better idea to turn around and deal with the Hammers, who are of course a much bigger threat. Popping Stengy ground as we do start pushing in, but my opponent decides at this point to simply GG out. So going quickly over the comp, the biggest downside to this composition was the lack of shooting. And really, if I was to do something differently, I would probably drop the Dirkid Squigs, downgrade them to normal Night Goblin Squig Hoppers. They'd still do their job rather well. And sub in some of these nasty Skulkers for the Rusty Arrows and a Gobbo Archer unit. That would have given me enough coverage to shut down my opponent's shooting and still apply some pressure to the Rangers. It would have really helped deal with these Gyrocopters in the early game, who got a lot of free damage and were a major nuisance. Otherwise, I think this build is rather potent. Black Orcs are something the Dwarves will struggle against. Now, this might change a little bit with the Giant Slayers. The Giant Slayers will be very efficient against both large and armor, so potentially they could be pretty good against the Orcs. Because Black Orcs, with their terrible melee defense, are going to struggle mightily against them. But nonetheless, this build I do think is pretty solid, at least here. Black Orcs doing a great job tearing through those hammers. You can see that definitely the hammers and Black Orcs both dishing out a lot of hurt to each other, except for this poor unit over here. For my opponent, his Slayers, of course, did an absolute number on the nasty Skulkers. But the rest of his army really kind of fell apart. And I think definitely I would have brought the Rune Lord on the Anvil with a Locus of Power in case of Azag with Fate of Buna. I don't actually think this is honest. I don't think this is that bad of a build. I think my opponent's biggest downfall was overextending. You don't really want to overextend. You don't want to over-separate with the Dwarves. The fact that I was able to kind of take apart his army piecemeal, had he been a little more blobbed up, a little more compact, I would have had a much more difficult time shutting him down. This way I was able to just kind of pick apart unit after unit, take advantage of the slightly superior speed the Greenskins have to slowly but surely pick his army apart. But yeah. Grimgor, lots of fun. Honestly, this is one of those niche matchups where Grimgor can actually do well. I don't think Grimgor with his buffs has become a much more competitive lord. He's still not top tier. Azag and Orzag are still generally better, but I do think he's got a bit of a powerful option here against the Dawi. So definitely some fun stuff. Good game to Uno Greco here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any additional comments, any criticisms, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I will respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.